Mr. Carney is contradicting himself again today as he plagiarizes my latest policy. On April the 1st, just 4 or 5 days ago, his government got rid of the apprenticeship grant. And today, after seeing that I support the grant and I'll bring it back, he's trying to plagiarize me yet again.
Well, this was certainly not on my bingo card this year. Don't get me wrong, this election is definitely about to get dirtier, especially in this upcoming week. That's typically how these campaign cycles go. But Mark Carney just threw his own father under the bus, which is honestly so interesting because he did that today, and ever so conveniently, Pierre Poilievre also spoke about his father today in quite a different light. Really goes to show you how obvious the answer is here, my friends. I'm Jasmine Lane. This is Over Opinionated. Pierre Poilievre fact-checked a couple of journalists earlier today, and it has become more clear than ever that the Liberal plan for the future is something that leads to the exact opposite of growth and prosperity. Danielle Smith brilliantly highlights that. All that and more is coming up. Be sure to subscribe, like, give us a follow on other platforms as well, and comment your thoughts down below. Let's first kick this off with something kind of funny and creepy and scary. I don't know what to describe it as yet. That is going around online. This just popped up in my feed. Mark Carney at his press conference today. Did he glitch, perhaps?
Now,
just wait for it.
You all, as workers,
still keep on waiting for it.
Canada's competitive advantages. That is in the fact that you contribute to a workforce comprised of skilled trades, comprised of people who know how to build an economy. You are at the heart of our workforce.
I'm about 99% sure that the reason why he did that directly into the camera line was because he was putting a hex on us or something. I think he just cursed us. And the reason why I showed you that is because if I'm getting cursed and hexed, there is no way I'm doing that alone. So now you are also cursed and hexed. You're welcome.
In the fact that you contribute to...
As a side note, if you were wondering how exactly it is that Canadians are falling for this, I mean, it is literally right here. So this was a Nanos poll that was done, and it shows trust in campaign promises, 48%. Mark Carney, 27%. Pierre Poilievre, that alone is like, wait a second. You mean to tell me that the guy who has changed his mind after writing books, after living an entire life supporting the same things that the Liberal Party did and has under his advisement for the last 5 years, suddenly changed his mind, and you trust him more than you trust the guy who's been saying the same things for the last 10 years? Alrighty then, but when it goes to show how lacking our critical thinking is, these were answers that were a part of one seamless poll questionnaire, and these were the answers that they pulled out of it. And I think that this is absolutely hilarious because the second poll shows this. The party that benefits from Canada-US tension the most, 56% Liberal, 16% Conservative. It's funny how while answering these questions, people couldn't put the pieces together. You couldn't have thought about this first one. Who does this benefit the most? Oh, well, obviously the Liberal Party. And then when asked who you trust the most, think to yourself, I wonder why I feel that way right now. My goodness.
Immigration policy made mistakes. We let in far too many people in all classes of immigration, from temporary workers to foreign students and beyond. And when I say too many, I mean relative to our capacity to receive these people. We didn't have enough housing, not enough social services. Those going to educational institutions weren't all getting the education they deserve, an education of the level that they deserve.
But yes, we totally trust Mark Carney there, even though Sean Fraser is running again under him after they booted out a different candidate so that Sean Fraser could run after he made this big announcement about how he was going to be so wonderful and great. And then he also has Nate Erskine-Smith as one of his ministers as well. Actually, the Minister of Housing, Infrastructure and Communities. In fact, the vast majority of Mark Carney's cabinet are the exact same people from Justin Trudeau's cabinet. So seems kind of weird that you would expect any change from the exact same people. And if that wasn't enough to set off some alarm bells for people, which clearly it did not, the Century Initiative co-founder Mark Wiseman, who wants Canada's population to increase by 100 million people by the end of the century, has officially been tasked as being the advisor to Mark Carney. Mark Wiseman, by the way, was the one who lobbied the Canadian government to increase our immigration targets to over 500,000 a year.
The Century Initiative is still perceived by some as only focusing on the goal of growing the population to 100 million by 2100. Let me be clear. I still believe in the viability of that goal.
Well, first, let me thank the Globe and Mark Wiseman, Century Initiative, everyone for this very timely discussion.
And as you can clearly see from this graph, that was an absolute failure. So, change? Yeah, I really don't think so. You would imagine somebody who's advising Mark Carney probably has the same ideas that Mark Carney wants to implement, which is why he's advising him in order to be able to do so.
They followed a radical globalist ideology of massive, uncontrolled population growth that put strain on our housing market, our healthcare, and our job market.
But no. The Liberal government and legacy media do not want you thinking about such things, which is why instead they want all of your algorithms, all of your news, and absolutely everything you see about this election to be about the fear they have been creating over Donald Trump.
How do you address the concerns of being too closely aligned to a foreign government that is threatening Canada and is destroying its own country right now?
Well, your question is false. Mr. Trump has endorsed the Liberals. He said it will be easier for him if the Liberals stay in power. He said it multiple times. He said that he doesn't agree with me, he doesn't support me, and he doesn't want me to be Prime Minister of Canada. I think a lot of people have to ask themselves, why does Donald Trump want the Liberals in power for a fourth term? The answer is clear. He wants Canada to be weak. And after the lost Liberal decade, with costs and crime up and our economy down under America's thumb, we are more vulnerable and dependent than ever before. And that's why we can't give them a fourth term. What we need is a government that's going to put Canada first for a change by axing taxes, unleashing our resources to bring home the $500 billion the Americans have stolen from us under the last years of the Liberals. It's time for a strong Canadian leader. A strong Conservative rather than a weak Liberal is exactly what this country needs, even if Donald Trump doesn't like it.
Can we all just objectively agree that the Liberal Party and campaign is so lame, the only thing they have to put a wedge in this election is this falsified, misleading creation of Donald Trump being Pierre Poilievre? That's it. Like, they don't have any policies to go after. They don't have anything the Conservatives have done to go after. Like, really think about that for a second. Even for the people who buy into it. That is so embarrassing that you don't see this. Like, that is actually really embarrassing that you are not able to grasp the whole picture and what's going on, and you're not able to reflect and think, that's weird that they haven't criticized Poilievre on any of his policies. I wonder why.
Mr. Carney is contradicting himself again today as he plagiarizes my latest policy. On April the 1st, just 4 or 5 days ago, his government got rid of the apprenticeship grant. And today, after seeing that I support the grant and I'll bring it back, he's trying to plagiarize me yet again. You can't believe anything he says when he does one thing on April Fool's Day, and then not even a week later, he says the opposite. He is just like Justin Trudeau, and there will be no change if you give Liberals a fourth term. I have announced a real plan for our apprentices. We will train up 350,000 of them. We'll bring back the apprenticeship grant Conservatives originally introduced and that Liberals have eliminated. And we will stand up for workers across this country.
And I really do believe that the Canadian public is so disillusioned as to the roles of Mark Carney in the past and what they entail. Sure, you have a stacked resume filled with a bunch of appointed jobs because you are an elite socialite. Duh, that's how almost everybody in those inner circles and their children make their millions, just as Mr. Carney has.
We're dealing with an economic crisis in Canada right now, and we need a good plan to get out of it. We've got the Trump tariff threats. We've got the fact that Trump wants to unleash the American economy, fundamentally transform it. He wants to alter the global trading system. All of these are threats to Canada, and we need to respond appropriately. Now, a lot of people are just saying, well, Mark Carney is an economist. He has to know what he's talking about. After all, he has a PhD from Oxford University. That's got to be way better than whatever Pierre Poilievre has. Well, let me point something out to you. It's not the piece of paper, it's your ideas. The guys that are advocating tariffs for Donald Trump, they went to university as well. Peter Navarro has a PhD in economics from Harvard. Kevin Hassett, one of Trump's other economic advisors, has a PhD from the University of Pennsylvania, a very good business school. And then you've got people like Howard Lutnick. He's got business experience, which Mark Carney likes to tout. He's far more successful than Mark Carney, and he loves tariffs despite being a billionaire. So it's not the piece of paper, it's not your experience, it's your policies. And Mark Carney's policies of leave oil and gas in the ground and focus on green energy, which has never worked, those are not the right policies for now. We need a plan. Mark Carney isn't the right one. And as Pierre Poilievre said the other day, a resume is not a plan.
This is a moment for our country, a moment in our history that we are about to define, a moment where we can stay strong and build the economy of the future, the strongest economy in the G7, or a moment where we can wither and lose out to our southern neighbor.
Now, this might be very eye-opening for you and perhaps worthwhile to share with friends of yours who are unbelievably misinformed and misled intentionally in order to get the Liberals rehired for a fourth term. Canada has the lowest productivity growth in the G7. In fact, Canadians are working more, working longer, and getting less output per hour. As an example here, the US worker gets approximately 3 times more capital investment than a Canadian one does. And the reason for that is due to overregulation, high taxes, weak competition, and people who are absolutely exhausted. Did you know, by the way, that real estate makes up 10% of Canada's GDP? Let's compare that to the United States, who has a far bigger population than we do, and their real estate only makes up 4 to 5% of their GDP. In essence, Canada's economy has become dangerously dependent on debt-fueled housing booms. In fact, Canada's household debt is now over 180% of disposable income. It's actually one of the highest in the world. And on top of that, our business investment has absolutely flatlined in recent years. A healthy economy should absolutely be built on productive sectors like, energy perhaps, not mortgages and condo flipping. Then we have our shrinking industrial base, something that has been showing signs of decline for the last decade that the Liberals, Anita Anand and Mark Carney all knew about and refused to do anything to change. What they did want, though, instead was to increase our immigration so that you would temporarily spike the debt to GDP ratio and we would look good in the G7, even though the catastrophic end result was on the horizon, which they did not care about at the time. Our manufacturing and energy sectors are heavily regulated, overtaxed, and they are very much politically hampered, and investment is fleeing to places that are far more friendly to investors, like the United States.
We will repeal all the anti-energy laws and rapidly approve LNG plants, 6 months approval times. We could have enormous $10 and $15 billion projects dotting all along the west coast of British Columbia, unlocking enormous paychecks for our tradespeople and our First Nations communities. This can only happen with a new government. The current Liberal government will stand in the way. That is why President Trump has said it is easier to deal with the Liberals. He wants to keep our resources under his control and our investment in his economy.
Canada also has the second highest government spending as a percentage of GDP in the G7. Normally, you would think, oh, well, that makes sense because, we have free healthcare, right? That's what everybody says. The facts are, though, that no, we spend a lot of money and we don't actually get that much out of it. Our healthcare is lagging, our infrastructure is delayed, and innovation funding is so unbelievably wasted, which is why it makes me actually laugh out loud when I hear Mark Carney make more announcements about increasing bureaucracy and increasing subsidies and government handouts, because as we can tell from the last decade, that ain't working.
Yeah, and the truth should not be insecure, right? Well, why do you need to shut the truth if it's the truth? If you're not lying, what is it that you're trying to censor?
Yeah, exactly. Well, I think it is a big political discussion, right? I mean, conservatives like to do things a little bit differently.
Yeah.
Conservatives, I believe, this is what you're seeing with the way we do government in my province, is that we begin by believing that an individual has inherent dignity and that we want to do whatever we can for human flourishment, for that individual to grow into an independent adult and marry and then form a family unit. And then that family unit becomes the social safety net and then be involved in community, whether that's a church group or a Rotary Club, so that becomes the first line of defense if something goes wrong in the community. And then government steps in as a last resort, not a first resort. I would say that the ideology on the other side is there a way for government to intervene first? And it seems like there's always this pressure of make it bigger and further away from people. So big, grand national programs so that you don't have what they call a patchwork. But every time you do that, you're just ending up funneling so much money away from tax-paying citizens into big bureaucracies, and you might not even end up solving the problem in the first place. So, but that is the reason, right? Those are the two big ideological poles that keep going back and forth.
And take note of the policy announcements from both Mark Carney and Pierre Poilievre. Mark Carney, hey, he may be this amazing, renowned, savior, God complex economist, but he also doesn't understand business, investment, or how to run a country. No, what he does understand, though, is how to set inflation rates and print money. That's actually about it. And that is evidently clear given that Pierre Poilievre is the one who comes up with all of these amazing ideas because he understands it, and Mark Carney does not. And then he feels perhaps a little bit insignificant, insecure, and he does in fact come from a long history of men who have God complexes and think that they are just the God gift to the earth, which is why Mark Carney says so many bizarre, out-of-touch things, as though he holds himself so much higher above absolutely anybody else. However, he did call out one of those men in his family.
Several articles out about your father, specifically about how he was a principal at a federal Indian day school and went on to defend residential schools. Do you share his views that residential school founders were not ill-intended and that Indigenous studies highlighting these negative effects of these institutions were, quote, slanted?
I love my father, but I don't share those views, to be absolutely clear. It's a long, painful part of our history. I've learned personally, we've learned as a nation. We're in a process of the damage, of the fundamental damage of residential schools and day schools to those who attended them, those who were their descendants, if I can put it that way, the culture as well, and a very necessary, essential process of reconciliation, truth and reconciliation has begun. At the core of my government, as it was the case at the core of the previous government, will be to advance that process of reconciliation. That's a fundamentally and deeply held personal commitment of mine.
If you are looking for more context about Mark Carney's father, he was a principal at residential schools. You can definitely find it. It is all over the internet. It's just a topic I have personally decided I don't want to deep dive into at all. But that is his answer. That is his family's history. Very powerful people who are shaping the new world, right? We hear Mark Carney say that all the time. And let's add something a little bit more lighthearted to wrap up this episode. Here is Pierre Poilievre speaking about his childhood and his father in comparison.
This is one of my favorite places in the entire world here in the Okanagan. I'm in Osoyoos right now, not far away in Penticton. My dad took us camping here when I was a kid, and I remember I walked over to the lake, and it was the first time I'd ever seen a jet ski. These kids were tearing around on these things, and I went back to my dad and I said, "Can you rent me one?" He said, "Well, $100 for an hour. There's no way we're doing that." So he rented me one of these little pedal boats, this little yellow plastic thing. I pedaled my way out to the middle of the lake, and then sure enough, these kids, these rich kids came along and started splashing me with their Sea-Doos and their jet skis and laughing at me for being on this little pedal boat. So I pedaled back to the shore, and I was in a puddle of tears, and I told my dad that I wanted to have a jet ski. And he said, "Well, you get back to Calgary, and you can get a job, and you can save up money, and when you're old enough to get a driver's license, then we'll lend you the minivan. You can fill it up with gas with your own money and drive back out and rent yourself a little camp spot, and then go out and rent a jet ski. In other words, if you want something, you got to work for it." So years later, I actually did it. I saved up the money, and I drove out our Chevy Lumina. It was those minivans that used to embarrass us kids. They looked like a spaceship. But anyway, I borrowed my mom's minivan, drove out to BC, and rented myself a Sea-Doo. Moral of the story is hard work is supposed to pay off. And that's actually kind of why we're in this, because right now hard work doesn't pay off. Our young people do work like crazy. They just don't get a lot for it after they pay tax and inflation and housing costs. So anyway, simple little campground story. Important lessons.
Thank you so much for watching another episode of Over Opinionated. I'm Jasmine Lane. Be sure to subscribe, follow, give us a like as well, and comment. We do not have a very long time to help this content and others like it as well reach the eyes and ears of as many people as humanly possible, because I don't think that it's going to be swing voters that will win this election. I think there are going to need to be some minds changed, and that is what I'm trying my best to do here. Anyway, I will talk to you very, very soon, and I hope you have a wonderful weekend.
Yeah, every time people want the government to take care of them, they lose their freedom.
They do, and it costs them a lot of money.
Yeah.
And that's I guess the real, because then what happens is if the more you get taxed to pay for the programs, then the less money it leaves you to be able to take care of yourself and your family.